Kendrick Lamar is back and is smoking everybody's top five, just like he promised last year on Family Times with Baby Keem. After 5 long years, Kendrick Lamar has finally returned with his fifth album, Mr.Morale and the Big Steppers. Kendrick Lamar was my introduction to the 2010s era of rappers. I listened to him on my he was one of the first rappers that I listened to on my own, because before I was listening to whatever my parents was giving to me, whether that be a Tribe Called Quest or Outkast, whichever that was. To Pimp Butterflies was one of the first CDs I ever bought, and I've been fascinated with Kendrick's storytelling ability since Good Kid, Mad City in 2012. So I was really looking forward to what he had to offer with his new release. One thing that about this album is that it's visual dense. Even as I write this now, I do not believe they have fully deciphered everything from this album. This is a mini review of some of the themes after sitting with this album for about a week and watching everything unfold with the album's reception, with everything that's on Twitter, TikTok, and everything else. This is an 18-track album, so not every track will need to be dissected as thoroughly as others. I will only be talking about the tracks that play into the major themes of this album. I will inform and critique you on the therapeutic aspect, his dissection of the savior complex, and the controversy surrounding the whole album. Mr.Morale and the Big Steppers is a double disc album, and contrary to the title order, side 1 is called The Big Steppers and side 2 is called Mr. Morale. The first side feels a little bit more like a stubborn side, and then the second side seems a little bit more reflective. I've been going through something. These are the first words we hear K. Dot speak on the album, and it's the perfect opening to this. The album opens with United in Grief, which begins with an angelic chorus chanting, "I hope you find some peace of mind in this lifetime." This plays into the theme of therapy that's littered throughout the album. Within that chorus, we hear his fiancée saying, "Tell the truth" in the distance. I feel like Kendrick is at the beginning half of his therapy sessions. He is still skeptical about therapy and still hasn't fully accepted it, and in turn has yet to tell his therapist his truth, which is whatever past trauma that is ailing his heart. He then tells us a story about how he hooked up with this green-eyed woman who recognized that they both use sex as a way to escape from their past traumas. He talks about his various spending habits and how he doesn't end up using most of the stuff that he buys. He closes the song by saying poverty was the case, but the money was wiping the tears away. A refrain is heard between these verses where he says, "I grieve differently." Kendrick believes that because there are not many in his position, so the way he handles his trauma, Kendrick believes that because there are not many in his position, so the way he handles his trauma is different from everybody else. He probably feels that therapy is beneath him. At the very last refrain, he says, "Everybody grieve different," which signifies he's finally accepting this therapy. The next track is called N95, which is an energetic hype track that begins with Kendrick telling us to take off various items as if he was robbing somebody. His flow is laid back but bouncy and infectious. It also signifies him telling us to probably take off whatever guise that you hide behind. He's also getting more comfortable in this therapy session, taking off his own mask. In the second verse, Kendrick goes on to talk about the 2020 pandemic and how it's left the world in complete economic recession. This feels like him deflecting within his therapy session, as none of these things really have anything to do with him. You also notice an increase in his rapping speed. Him going on about the world also plays into a savior complex that he's developed over the course of his career. Kendrick knows that he's the driving force in hip-hop, so sometimes he believes he must bear the weight of the world on his shoulders. In his final verse, he finally snaps, most likely getting cornered within the session. His flow is going at a rapid pace, He's rattling off the things that have been bothering him internally. This is when he hits the breakthrough in his therapy session. At this point, he's bombarding us with all of his trauma at once. He feels like he's hyperventilating and he can't even hold his breath for 1 second. This therapy concept is continued throughout the project, with each track digging deeper and deeper into Kendrick's mind and traumas. Another recurring theme within this album is the dissection of the savior complex. This is apparent in the song Savior with Baby Keem and Sam Dow. In it, he says Kendrick made you think about it, but he is not your savior. Cole made you feel empowered, but he is not your savior. Future said get a money counter, but he is not your savior. Braun made you get his flowers, but he is not your savior. Kendrick believes that black celebrities should not be viewed as leaders of the black community. Each of these names mentioned holds weight in the black community. Cole for his uplifting messages, Future for his lavish lifestyle, and LeBron for his legendary basketball career. Kendrick is also very aware that he is among the mix for dropping his decade-defining album To Pimp a Butterfly to vast critical acclaim. It is without a doubt that all of these are inspiring moments for the black community. Just because they have inspired the black community doesn't mean that they are fully equipped to be solely responsible to lead the fight against repression. Later on in the song, he says, "The cat is out of the bag, I am not your savior. I find it just as difficult to love thy neighbors, especially when people got ambiguous favors. But their heart's not in it, see, everything's for paper. The struggle is for the right side of history." Kendrick doubled down on this earlier statement about not being the Messiah. Even though he may want to save everyone, he is only a mortal man. If he was truly Jesus, he would be able to follow the second commandment, love thy neighbor as you love thyself. There's a certain paranoia that comes with being a celebrity. They have a deep mistrust for anyone trying to do any favors for them, as they'll always believe that they'll get something out of it. Kendrick will always believe that these people will only leech off of him for their own gain, whether that be for money or for fame. He wants to see the best in people, but he also recognizes the reality that greed plagues the music industry. There are two massive controversies surviving this album. The first regarding the song Onto Your Ears. It tells the story of his aunt transitioning and Kendrick's experiences with homophobia and transphobia within the black community. The problem is Kendrick repeatedly uses an F slur to signify the insults bullies would say about his relative. He also continually misgenders and dead names that's relevant throughout the song. While I do believe Kendrick had good intentions with the song, it may end up doing a little bit more harm than good. This song feels like a step forward but 3 steps back. Dead naming is something you should never intentionally do. The new name a transgender person chooses is the one that better fits their identity. With this new name and this new identity, the person who they were before is dead. The current person is alive, so that's the name that should be used. If you dead name, you could give a trans person the impression that you don't really respect them. The National Library of Medicine did a study with 129 transgender conforming youth. They found that they showed fewer signs of depression when using their chosen names. At the end of the song, Kendrick juxtaposes the N-word with the F slur in the black community. This is a callback to when he invited a white woman on stage to perform his song Mad City, but she kept saying the N-word while up there. Another discourse from this is the appearance of Florida rapper Kodak Black. One of the themes in this album is Kodak Black has pled guilty to an SA charge on a minor and is also a convicted felon. There's also one of the themes in this album is rehabilitation. And if he really wanted to pull off this rehabilitation concept, I feel like he could have done this with a person less heinous. Why not use somebody like Bobby Shmurda, who was only incarcerated for conspiracy and a weapons charge? Overall, I do enjoy the time I've spent dissecting this album. I feel like I'm just now starting to pull back the layers of this album has to offer. Mr.Morale and the Best Big Steppers has some of Kendrick's best songs. that Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers has some of Kendrick's best songs, and it's definitely his most lyrically dense album to date. Despite the despite the lows on this album, it is definitely one of the best albums to come from 2022 so far. This is due to the therapeutic aspect and the dissection of the savior complex. I could say that this album was worth the wait because Kendrick was definitely smoking top fives with this album.